going? Are we ready? Good evening. I'm Panos, and co-founder and CEO at Susurrus, and tonight we'll speak about influencer marketing, everything you always wanted to know but you were afraid to ask. So, first of all, what do we mean with the term influencers? In general, influencers are considered people that have a dedicated follower base on social media, usually starting from 10,000 followers. They have expertise in a certain field. They produce high-quality content, and they definitely affect consumption behaviors. I guess most of us should be familiar with that, especially on Instagram, aren't we? So why influencer marketing is important and why you should care? Well, I'd say that after more than 20 years of online advertising, we have shifted to a new era. People are sick and tired of the old school advertising methods. They don't care about brands and products anymore. All they do care is about people and stories that matter to them. And stats don't lie. So when people purchase online above any other source of information, they trust recommendations from influencers and friends on a 92%. Moreover, according to a research that was done last year from Twitter and Analect, brands have generated direct sales from influencers mentions on a 45%. It is the #1 trend in digital advertising. Make a stop for newcomers to adapt to us. Okay. So I don't want to bother you way more with stats. I just want you to take a minute and consider this. The number of online searches regarding influencer marketing is growing on a 5,000% month rate. If you're still not convinced about influencer marketing, let's have a look at the benefits when you're collaborating with influencers. The first and I guess most obvious ones is that you're getting advertised in targeted audiences. Unless you have a really mass product, there are people that probably are not interested in your product and services. So you don't want to target them because you don't want to spend money on people that are never interested in your services. By approaching influencers, you have access to highly specific niche audiences that most of them probably are potential buyers. Apart from that, also, as probably many of you know, it's something completely different in the pyramid of advertising to have somebody else to speak about you than you speaking about yourself, let alone if we're talking about industry experts. Of course, by collaborating with influencers, you have access to kick-ass creative content that then you can use on your very own channels. Moreover, if you happen to do collaborations apart from social platforms to their blogs as well, and if you do it properly, there are high chances that you can increase your SEO ranking due to the qualitative content as well as on the backlinks. Another thing is that for the most of cases, we're talking about small startups or SMEs. So the case is that you haven't properly built your brand to have a strong brand positioning. So influencers can also help you in terms of setting up your brand awareness. Finally, but very important, is that if you want to do it properly, you'd better go and do it through an influencer marketing platform as well, in terms of having a clear view on the analytics. You have to understand that this isn't and shouldn't be another silly PR campaign. It's a completely advertising method that you know how it's been sent every single dollar you spent on it. So by now, I guess it should be a little bit more clear the value of influencer marketing. And now let's dig a little bit into the steps. So initially, and I can really stress out how important it is, you have to know your audience and your brand's value. By audience, I mean you have to really understand your customers. If you're startuppers, probably you've heard of Steve Blank saying that you better know what's the color of the underwear of your customers, otherwise you're getting nowhere. So you should know, are we talking about students, pupils, young professionals, senior professionals, families, housewives? What's their daily routine look like? Where do they shop? What days and time? How often do they shop? What are the substitutes? And on the very same time, you have to also have in mind your brand's values and how they fit within your target audience. Once you've done this, then you have to identify the right influencers that suit your brand. But how are you going to do this? There are many things that you can do. I'll highlight the most important ones. So first of all, especially if we're talking about Instagram mainly, I'd say it's very important to take care of hashtags. How it works, especially with lifestyle influencers, is that they use hashtags that is a combination of the countries and cities they live on, along with the verticals they operate, name it fashion, beauty, food, travel, etc., as well as in the words bloggers and influencers. To make it completely clear, if we're talking about a fashion influencer in Dubai, probably she's already using terms like Dubai influencer, Dubai blogger, Dubai fashion blogger, and so on. Another very important thing is to take care of groups and communities. Groups mainly on Facebook and communities on Instagram and on Twitter. By term communities, I'm referring about pages that mainly what they do is promoting influencers and tagging and sharing them, so it's kind of an easy way to find a directory of influencers. And of course, always pay attention to top locations that matter to your vertical. What I mean is, if for example you have a restaurant, you could search for other top restaurants in your location, especially through Instagram again. So this way, what can you do? Once you search for a location, the screen is split on two parts. The one is most recent posts and most popular posts. In the most popular posts, most of them, high chances are that are posts from influencers. So this way, so far you have done a competition analysis, have identified some key influencers and found them through groups and communities. And this is very important, but can only get you that far. But all this has nothing to do if you don't use data. And how you can have access to data? Only if you can sign up in influencer marketing platforms that have them signed up with their credentials, so you know where their audience is coming from. I mean, you've identified some influencers, but how are you sure that they don't have fake followers? Or even their followers are original? How are you sure that their followers are within your demographics you want to target? No matter if an influencer, for example, is based in Dubai, it doesn't necessarily mean that his audience is also from Dubai, because he mainly originates from another country, has spent quite a few countries on the other side, or for some other reason, most of their audience is from another country or city. So you'd better know properly if their audience resonates with your brand. Otherwise, you have some great quality content, but it has nothing to do with your target audience. Once you've identified the right influencers you want to collaborate, the next critical part is how to set up the creative part of the campaign. And here is very important to understand the influencers. Influencers are people as well, and in particular they are businesses, so you have to treat them well, understand what they look like, and most of all understand that this should be a win-win situation. So what influencers are looking for? First of all, they are looking for innovation. They want to always stay updated with the latest trends and showcase to their followers new ideas. Moreover, as well, these are businesses and they want to grow, so they want to get recognition and to grow their follower base. So if you're doing collaborations with influencers, don't hesitate to engage with them on social or even repost their posts. Influencers are dying for exclusivity. If you can give them exclusive perks and access to products that other people can't have, this is something that you can win them forever. No? And finally, you should get over the transaction model. It's not anymore about making a transaction with an influencer, pay a certain post, and that's all. You have to set up for the long term. You have to understand that this is a collaboration that should make positive income after after quite some time. So you have from the very first set down and write down the terms, agree on what's expected from each side, and understand that this is a long-term strategy. Once you've done all this, now you should expect to see some results regarding your campaign. Again, I strongly believe that the proper way to do it is through analytics platforms, even if there are standalone analytics platforms or incorporated within influencer marketing platforms. Otherwise, you can just have a rough sense, mainly from social media or on a best case scenario with screenshot analytics. What you should also have in mind here is that you should find for industry benchmarks and make comparisons to see how the influencers perform. And secondly, compare the influencers in between them. I mean, if influencers of the same size of audience and engagement have completely different results, then you should see which one perform better, because probably they are better for your brand. And last but not least, have in mind that generally influencers are not great for every single activation. There are influencers that can attend in an event and make it and boost it and make people to attend it. There are some that are really great on generating awareness for your brand, and there are others that are way more performing in terms of increasing your signups. One that's worked great for one thing doesn't particularly mean that they are great on every single creative campaign. And once you find all these things, now it's time to make it scale. And now some really useful tips, I think. First of all, I think, at least from our experience, lifestyle always works better. And by lifestyle, I mean fashion, beauty, food, travel, health and fitness, parenting, sports, and tech. Or mainly talking about consumer products. If we're talking about business-to-business products, this is something completely different. It's a different case, way more tough, other type of influencers, other platforms, mainly LinkedIn and Twitter. You have to be relevant and creative with your audience. Relevant is the thing we've already discussed before in terms of identifying the right audience, but on the same time being creative. Let's take an example here. Imagine, for example, Kellogg's, and they have a new series of muesli they want to promote. The obvious thought should be that they should go for food influencers. But this is not a good strategy. Why? Because muesli are a standalone product. So food influencers, where they do actually thrive, is in terms of getting some products and implement them within a food recipe and then give it to brands. In that case, it could be way more valuable for Kellogg's to go for lifestyle, fashion, and beauty influencer. These influencers should implement it within their day and say how they stay fit by getting muesli for breakfast or as a snack within the day. The most common pitfall that people and brands do is that they're getting impressed for the number of followers. But this is a vanity metric, unless you see how much engagement each one of them takes. And here I want to take on a very certain example. Let's say, for example, that you really have allocated a very good amount for influencer marketing, and you find one influencer that has 1 million followers on Instagram and has 1% engagement rate. This should mean that he should generate around 10,000 reactions. And an industry average should be at least to pay for one post on Instagram more than $5,000 or $6,000. If, for example, you're going for an influencer that has 100,000 followers and has 11–12% engagement rate, this should be way more high. This would be even higher from the celebrity side, let alone that an influencer within 100,000 followers should charge around $1,500. So engagement comes always before reach. Of course, you don't give pre-made content. As we discussed, as I said earlier, the most important thing is to collaborate with the influencers and set down and write down the terms. What I do mean here is that you don't expect influencers to post some pre-made content, because we've shifted from the PR era of press releases and stuff like that. The influencers have engaged with their audiences, know how to communicate with them better, so they know how to make it more seamless and organic within their accounts. What you should do is take care of two things. One, you don't give pre-made content, but on the other side, have a clear view that they stay aligned with your brand values. It's something that they have freedom upon the creative part, and it's another completely different thing that they should stay aligned with your brand values. Again, it should be a campaign that should generate some awareness. So most of the times, even for small brands, you should try at least to implement 4 or 5 of them if we're talking on the lower scale. Even if we're talking for small influencers that have around 15 or 20,000 followers. And I also believe that it's not a one-off shot. You should implement it within your marketing strategy. As you do with all the rest of your marketing channels, you have to repeat it on a constant basis. Whether it is a new product release, a major update, or some major news you want to share with your clients or outreach to new ones, then you should also implement within your marketing mix influencer marketing. Another very important part is that you should also try, even if you go direct, to pay the influencers, or if you go through the platforms, going for the platforms that pay the influencers. As they say, if you pay peanuts, you get monkeys. So if you don't standardize the process, it's gonna backsuit on you. What I mean is, if you pay for influencers, you're gonna pay for the professional ones, set down from the beginning the deliverables and the time frame, and then it's a standardized process. Otherwise, if you can't pay someone, how can you expect that they can deliver on time and what you actually want them to do? Best cases, I mean, this should sound obvious, but initially when you're launching a product, more important, because if you're launching within your market, maybe it should be way more easy to attract them. But if you're entering a new market, this should be a really hard part. Event, it sounds really great to have some influencers to boost about it and attend the event. And of course, for promoting giveaways, and some influencers are really specialized in product reviews. You can get some really great product reviews. Again, I think that is obvious, but should be noticed, is that success doesn't come overnight. I mean, nothing can be extended and executed overnight and see major results. As with the rest of your plan and your marketing plan, you should implement it and expect after some months to see actual results. It's in terms of if it's the first time you're doing it, what you should do is that try to experiment, approach some influencers, see how it works, and once you find the ones that are more approachable and more easy to collaborate with your brand, then you can scale it. And it's okay, probably most of the times it's not gonna work for the very first time, but here the thing is not to be first, it's about being right. And last but not least, in terms of tips, please don't go for celebrities unless you're P&G, J&J, or I don't know. Because, as we said earlier, it makes no sense in terms of budgeting as well as for the results. Here, what we can see is that the pyramid of influence is being split on 3 parts. On the top of it is celebrities, people that have usually more than 400,000 or 500,000 followers. The micro-influencers that, usually have from 10 up to 100 or 200,000 followers. And the rest one are consumers, and on the upper side of consumers are the power consumers that are flirting with the boundaries of micro-influencers. I want to stay with the micro-influencers now. What do you mean by micro-influencers? Are influencers with the definition we shared earlier, but are mainly in the brands of 10 to 100,000 followers. And this should be ideally your first target market. Why? Because their audience is way more targeted. It exceeds the consumer base when somebody has some hundreds of followers on Instagram, and it's less than celebrities, but this is the most significant part. As discussed, and as you can see if you do some basic searching, even on Google, these are the ones that produce really high engagement, taking also into consideration the amount of followers they have. Usually, micro-influencers have engagement rates from 4 up to 15 or even 20%. For celebrities, for the ones that exceed 1 million people, it should be a rare case to see them have more than 1.5% engagement rate. Obviously, as a result, they are cost-effective. They establish trust because they are trusted peers within their communities. And as a result, they also boost conversions. And before closing, let's have a look at influencer marketing platforms. The major things that are doing are 3. First one, finding the right influencers. Here, there are 2 basic approaches. One is kind of a directory when you can go through profiles and find different respective influencers, and the other that works like Facebook or Google Ads in terms of setting up the audience, gender, age groups, countries, cities, interests, networks, and so on. And if they have the influencers onboarded, then they can connect you with the respective influencers. The second part is how do you engage with them? Again, there are different cases. There are platforms that say we will only show you the influencers and contact info, and then you take it from there. Actually, most of the time, it should be you that communicates with the influencers. The most important thing is that if we're talking about campaigns with more than 5 or 6 influencers involved, you'd better do it through a platform in terms of standardizing the process. Otherwise, imagine you have to run a campaign with 10 influencers, and you have to negotiate with every single one of them the price, deliverables, time frame, and so on. You have to go through Facebook Messenger probably, phone, email, Trello, and I don't know. If you can do it seamlessly through a platform, it saves you obviously quite of the operational costs. And finally, how can you measure the ROI? Some things are pretty obvious in terms of engagement. You can see it through social media, or with influencers, maybe you can get some screenshot. But the platforms, what they do is that they incorporate the APIs of Facebook, Instagram, and other social platforms, so they can give more valuable insights about the audience and the performance of influencers. Now I should do a seamless self-promotion in terms of actually showing how our platform works on a very short video. So as you can see, initially you can set up the audience by choosing gender, age groups, countries, cities, interests, purpose, and budget. And based on filters like this, you can see influencers' profiles. You can go on every single profile and see their demographics and how much they charge. Once you find the appropriate ones, then it's time for the influencers to execute and publish the content. Usually, in terms of lifestyle, the content is in forms of videos, photos, and blog posts that should be incorporated within the blogs, as well as on their social media platforms. And finally, from the very moment that you have access, that the posts are up and running, you have access to the analytics part. So here, you can see the results of your campaign, and you should see them in total as for every single influencer in terms of total audience, how many people read the posts, how many convert, and so on, as well as conversions on social media. When you shouldn't use influencer marketing platforms, there are a couple of cases. Obvious is if you need celebrities, probably most of the platforms don't have celebrities. Celebrities are on their own or have talent agents that handle them exclusively. If you're lucky enough to know them in person and need just 4 or 5 of them, it's pretty good to go and do it standalone. Or if it's just a small collaboration, or for the moment you don't have sufficient budget, it makes no sense to sign up for every platform. Before I close in, I'd like you to stay with this. As said, we have shifted from the traditional era. People do not buy goods and services, they buy relations, stories, and magic. Thank you. I'm happy to answer your questions. Please.
I don't know if I missed it, but can you talk about cost?
Okay. Cost has always to do regarding countries as well, because different countries, prices of influencers differ. So if we're talking for the Emirates, and for the lifestyle sector mainly, as far as I know, in terms of fashion, beauty, food, travel, and so on, it should be estimated based on 2 parts, the size of their followers and their engagement rate. Usually I'd say that, for example, influencers that have 50,000 followers on Instagram and have a proper engagement rate of at least 2.53% should charge for one post $500 to $600. Generally, for every 10,000 followers, they charge $100. As the amount of followers decreases, the pricing increases because there's the content production. But as the number of followers increases, then the price decreases. So it doesn't mean that for an influencer with 10 million followers, you should pay 20,000. Probably you should pay around 6,000 to 10,000. But not sure. Did I answer your question?
You did.
Okay. And also one more note is that if you're doing collaborations with influencers and they also have a blog presence, then try to get the whole package. Because if they have blog and let's say they have Facebook and Instagram, and on Instagram they have 50,000 followers, and on Facebook 5,000 to 10,000 followers, how much they charge for Instagram is just a little bit less than they should charge for the whole action. So for paying just a little bit more, you have access also to a blog post with all the benefits, and make sure that it's spread across the platforms.
Are there any other platforms like this, or is this the only one?
No, there are quite a few. I mean, depending also on the markets, the most mature market obviously is the States. There are quite a few big players.